My parents spent my wedding fund on my twin sister's lavish celebration, then blamed me when she eloped with my ex-best friend a week later. When the scandal hit the papers and the groom's family sued, they came crawling back for help. But I had already built something better without them, without apologies. My name is Hannah Green. They say twins share everything. But from the moment I was born, exactly 9 minutes after my sister Charlotte, it was clear we were never going to share the same place in our parents' hearts. Growing up in Hartford, Connecticut, our lives looked identical from the outside. Same birthday, same school, same house with green shutters and a maple tree out front, but inside that house the lines were drawn early. Charlotte was the chosen one. The miracle child. My mother Ruth used to tell people how Charlotte came out eyes wide open, already alert, already special. When I followed 9 minutes later, pink and crying, my father Walter apparently said, "Well, I guess we've got a bonus." That bonus part stuck. I became the extra. The quieter one. The reliable one. The one they didn't worry about, talk about, or make space for. Charlotte cried easily. She also laughed louder, demanded more, and got it. She was all glitter and noise while I was the backdrop she bounced off. In kindergarten, we were both in the school play. I landed the lead role in Little Red Riding Hood. Charlotte was a flower who had 2 lines. On the night of the performance, she forgot them. She stood frozen in front of the audience and then burst into tears. My parents rushed out of their seats like there had been a fire. By the time they got her calmed down backstage, I had finished the play, taken my bow, and was waiting for someone to tell me I did okay. No one did. That night at home, the talk was all about how brave Charlotte was for even trying. My mother wiped her tears like they were gold and said she was proud of her courage. No one mentioned I carried the show on my 6-year-old shoulders. That pattern never changed. When Charlotte got a B-, she got a congratulatory trip to get ice cream. When I got an A+, my dad would just pat my head and ask if I'd fed the dog. It wasn't that I wasn't loved, at least not in the conventional sense. I was clothed, fed, driven to school, but I wasn't seen. Not the way Charlotte was. My achievements didn't light up a room. My disappointments didn't require family meetings. I became background noise in my own home. In 3rd grade, I won a local poetry contest. I had written a piece about winter and the way icicles dripped like tears. I stayed up 3 nights revising that poem. I got to read it at the library in front of an actual crowd, including the mayor. My parents said they'd come. They didn't. That was the same night Charlotte's guinea pig died. Apparently, she had cried so hard that they just couldn't leave her alone. In middle school, Charlotte tried out for cheerleading. She didn't make it. She came home sobbing and locked herself in her room. My mother baked her brownies and told her she was too special for cliques anyway. That same week, I won a math competition. I placed 1st in the state. My trophy was taller than I was. It stayed in the trunk of my dad's car for 2 weeks because, as he put it, we didn't have shelf space. I didn't stop trying. Not yet. I told myself if I just worked harder, they'd notice. I joined clubs. I ran for student council. I got into advanced classes. I helped Charlotte with her homework even though she rarely said thank you. I figured maybe she'd be proud of me even if they weren't. She wasn't. Not really, but that was Charlotte. She didn't have to reach for anything. It all came to her. And if it didn't, someone brought it anyway. By high school, I had stopped telling them about the things I did. When I got my first A in AP Physics, I told my guidance counselor instead. When I placed top 10 in the regional science fair, I just smiled to myself and celebrated with a new notebook. Charlotte got invited to prom by the captain of the soccer team. The same week, I got accepted into an early college prep program. The only thing my parents said was that they hoped I wouldn't get so busy I forgot to help Charlotte with her essays. There were moments, small ones, where I wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe I was just sensitive. Maybe all siblings felt like this. But then holidays would come. Family friends would ask about Charlotte's plans, her outfits, her drama. If they asked about me at all, my mom would laugh and say, "Oh, Hannah, she's good. Always good. Never a problem." Being never a problem meant being never a priority. It's funny. People assume twins are close. They imagine a psychic bond matching outfits, secret languages. Maybe that's true for some. But for us, there was always a glass wall. She lived on the celebrated side. I watched from the other. The older we got, the thicker it became. Even birthdays felt like borrowed space. Charlotte would throw a party every year. I was allowed to invite 2 friends. The rest of the guest list was hers. One year I got a book I already owned while she got a gold necklace with her name on it. Still, I didn't leave. I didn't explode. I didn't rebel. I performed. I achieved. I graduated top of our class. I got a full ride to the University of Washington. On graduation night, my parents cried. For Charlotte, because she was so brave to finish high school even with all the social pressure. I smiled. I clapped. I packed my bags. And I left. Now 15 years later, I'm sitting on a red-eye flight from Seattle back to Hartford. It's Thanksgiving again. The seatbelt light blinks above me. The hum of the engine is steady. I stare out into the darkness beyond the window and think about the maple tree in front of our old house, the one that never lost all its leaves even in winter. 30 years. 30 years of being the second thought, the backup plan, the shadow. 30 years of doing everything right and still being invisible. And still I'm going home. By the time I stepped out of the terminal at Bradley International, the cold hit me like a slap. Hartford air always had a bite this time of year, sharper somehow when it wrapped around memories I hadn't asked to revisit. I pulled my coat tighter and waited at the curb for the rental car shuttle, watching people hug and wave and laugh like coming home was something joyful. Maybe it was for some. I hadn't driven down our old street in over a year, but every turn was still muscle memory. Same cracked pavement. Same white house with blue shutters. The maple tree in front had lost most of its leaves, now bare branches stretched out like arms expecting something. A welcome maybe. Or a warning. My parents weren't home when I arrived. That was fine. I didn't come for them anyway. I was there for time. For space. For closure if such a thing existed. I made tea in the kitchen using the same chipped mug with the faded cardinal on it that I used as a kid. Some things never changed. The calendar on the wall still had photos of cats in seasonal outfits. The fridge was covered in magnets from places Charlotte had visited and I hadn't. I sat at the kitchen table and thought about everything I'd built. After high school, I packed my life into 2 suitcases and boarded a flight to Seattle. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. The University of Washington became my sanctuary. I majored in computer science, worked nights at a coffee shop downtown, coded during the day, and kept my head down. I graduated magna cum laude, earned a scholarship to a postgraduate research project, and turned that into an internship at a tech startup called EchoLayer. It was scrappy then. 15 people working out of a WeWork space, trying to convince the world we could build a platform that streamlined security access for businesses without selling out user privacy. I was 24, tired and obsessed. The good kind of obsessed. By 27, I had been promoted twice. They gave me equity in the company. Not a lot at first, but enough to feel like I mattered. I slept on my couch some nights, lived on ramen and cold brew, and poured everything into building something real. Meanwhile, Charlotte was posting beach selfies from the Dominican Republic, tagging boyfriends whose names changed every few months. She had dropped out of community college after a semester. Said it didn't align with her spirit. She moved back home, worked part-time at a boutique, and spent her weekends at yoga retreats or music festivals. She called it finding herself. My parents called it brave. Every few months, my mother would send me updates. Charlotte's latest creative pursuit, Charlotte's meditation teacher, who said she had rare healing energy. Charlotte's new boyfriend who worked in real estate but had a side passion for sculpture. She sent me pictures. Charlotte on a boat. Charlotte in a silk robe holding crystals. Charlotte lighting candles for a full moon ritual. Once I sent a photo back. Me at a whiteboard leading a team meeting for a product we were launching. My mom never responded. I used to call more often. Sunday nights. I'd ask about their garden, about Dad's knees, about how Aunt Teresa was doing after her surgery. I told them about the app we were developing, the new version of our encryption algorithm, the tech conference where I was invited to speak. Every time the conversation drifted. Are you eating enough? Do you even leave the office? You know Charlotte's been practicing mindfulness. You should try that. When are you coming home? Don't work so hard you miss out on life. And of course the one question that kept showing up like a ghost at every call. Have you met anyone yet? I told them I was focused on work, that I didn't have time for dating, that I was happy. My mother always sighed like that was a tragedy. Then one evening, in early 2022, I called to tell them we were preparing for a potential IPO. It was confidential at the time, but I was too excited not to say something. I thought maybe they'd be proud. I thought maybe they'd ask how I felt or what it meant for me. Instead, my mom asked if I had frozen my eggs yet. I remember standing in my kitchen holding the phone in one hand and a glass of seltzer in the other, staring out the window at the street below. Cars passed. A dog barked. Somewhere upstairs, my neighbor was vacuuming. And my mother was talking about Charlotte's recent trip to Sedona. How she had seen an energy reader who told her big changes were coming. How maybe, just maybe, Charlotte would settle down soon. With the right man, with the right timing. That was the last time I called her without waiting for a reason. I started filtering the relationship down to birthdays and holidays. I let emails go unanswered. I stopped texting first. I pulled back like a tide leaving a beach it no longer recognized. Echo layer kept growing. We expanded to 3 offices. I started leading product development. My team called me the calm in the chaos. I mentored interns. I flew to conferences in San Francisco and New York and spoke on panels about ethical tech. And when I looked up one day and realized I was living in a condo with floor-to-ceiling windows and a skyline view, I thought maybe this is what peace looks like. Maybe this is what winning quietly feels like. Charlotte visited Seattle once. She stayed with a friend but asked to meet up for brunch. She showed up 40 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and a fur-lined denim jacket. She talked about her wellness blog that hadn't launched yet and how exhausting it was being misunderstood. She asked if I was still working at that app place. That app place was now valued at close to $1 billion. I paid the check. She didn't say thank you. When she left, she hugged me like we were close. Like we had something real. I went home and cried for reasons I couldn't explain. Now sitting at my childhood kitchen table, I looked around at the same curtains, the same clock ticking just a few seconds too slow, and wondered how many stories I had told in this house that no one ever really heard. And how many more I would have to keep to myself. The letter arrived a week after the funeral, thick ivory envelope with my name written in my grandmother's unmistakable cursive. Inside, the legal documents came first carefully clipped together and printed on formal stationery with Monica Tran's firm letterhead at the top. Monica had been my friend since undergrad and now worked in estate law downtown. We hadn't seen each other in person for a while, but she had promised me she'd handle everything cleanly when Grandma Elaine passed. The funeral itself had been quiet, respectful, with too many lilies and not enough warmth. Charlotte had cried with her usual theatrical flair, throwing herself on our mother's shoulder in the front pew and whispering dramatic little comments like she's the one who always believed in me. She believed in both of us, I wanted to say, but didn't. Back at my place in Seattle, I opened the envelope at my kitchen table beside a mug of coffee and the sound of rain tapping on the windows. Monica's cover letter summarized the estate savings, jewelry, a few bonds. But the most specific line was highlighted in yellow. A wedding fund, divided equally between her 2 granddaughters. With a legal clause stating that misuse by either party could be contested by the other. Attached to it was my grandmother's handwritten note. If they forget your worth again, Hannah, I want you to remember this. You get to choose your own family. If they don't pick you, pick yourself. You were never second to me. My hands shook a little as I folded the note back into the envelope. I hadn't told anyone I didn't plan on having a wedding. Not a big one anyway. Maybe a backyard with friends, a linen dress, maybe a dog running through the grass. I hadn't said anything because no one had asked. Still, the idea that she had thought about me at all, made plans for me in a way no one else in our family ever did, felt like a small miracle. I texted Monica a simple thank you. She replied within minutes with a thumbs up emoji and a note saying the account had been set up. My portion would be held in trust until I used it with digital access only under my name. It felt safe. Like something solid I could stand on if everything else cracked. I never imagined that within 3 months it would disappear. Charlotte's engagement announcement came through Facebook first. A glossy photo of her and Josh Carlisle on a yacht in Key West, her hand extended, ring sparkling like a disco ball in the sun. Captioned with something vague about soul contracts and second chances. The comment section was full of hearts and congratulations. Our mother's post, which she shared 3 times that week, said something about divine timing and the power of letting your children grow into themselves. My phone stayed silent. I didn't get a call. No message. No heads up from anyone in the family. I learned about the pre-wedding celebration from a coworker, Emily, who had gone to college with Charlotte's fiancé. She forwarded me the invite flyer, which had been circulating in some social media circle I wasn't part of. Elegant gold lettering, ivory background, an RSVP link, and the venue. The Ashford Grand Ballroom. That was not a backyard. That was not a DIY flower arch and cupcakes from Costco. The website for the Ashford featured crystal chandeliers, imported marble, personal stylists, a wine menu with pairings per course. I had to close the browser after 10 minutes. My stomach was tight and my ears buzzed. I called my mom that night. Straightforward. I just asked if she had time to talk. Her voice was warm but distracted. Oh honey, yes, but I have to be quick. The florist is coming in the morning and Charlotte's fittings got moved around, so we're trying to reshuffle the itinerary. There was a pause while I absorbed that sentence. The florist. Charlotte's fittings. I asked if there had been a mistake with the trust fund. That I had logged in the week before and couldn't access the account. I kept my tone calm. Another pause. Oh, that. Well, we needed to consolidate some of the payments. Everything is just so expensive these days, you wouldn't believe it. But don't worry, sweetheart, it's all family. We'll settle it. When the time comes. When the time comes. Like I was a placeholder. Like I was a line item that could wait indefinitely. You used the fund, I said quietly. The wedding fund Grandma left for both of us. She sighed like I was making something difficult. Charlotte's wedding is happening now, Hannah. Yours is. Well, you've never really talked about marriage. And Charlotte's the one getting married. It just made sense. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't hang up. I said okay. And then I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling of my apartment, wondering how people could steal from you with a smile on their face and still think they were doing you a favor. A week later, Instagram exploded with photos from the pre-wedding weekend. There were drone shots of the Ashford charcuterie tables longer than my first apartment, Charlotte, in 3 different designer gowns. The captions read things like Sacred Union and Love in Abundance. Guests posed with crystal glasses, men in tuxedos, with no jackets, women in silk and diamonds. I wasn't there. I wasn't even mentioned. My mother sent a group email afterward thanking everyone for attending Charlotte's celebration of light and joy. I scrolled to the bottom. My name was not on the CC list. When I asked her a few days later, she said, "Oh well, we didn't think you'd want to come. You never liked those big events. You've always preferred staying behind the scenes." She said it like it was a compliment. Like being forgotten was a personality trait. I closed my laptop. I poured myself a glass of wine. I sat on the floor and let the silence settle around me. My grandmother had tried to give me something of my own. And just like everything else in my life, it had been repurposed for Charlotte. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about the pattern, the rewriting of stories, the redirection of love. And I was finally ready to read the fine print. Thanksgiving dinner at the greenhouse was always a performance. Ruth brought out the fine china, the kind with the tiny blue flowers no one was allowed to use the rest of the year. Walter hovered near the turkey like he had roasted it himself, even though we all knew it came from a catering place in West Haven. Charlotte wore a cream cashmere sweater dress and heels that made her taller than everyone but Uncle Mitch, who showed up 15 minutes late, carrying a bottle of bourbon and a box of crackers he found at a gas station. We sat at the long oak table, 15 of us if you counted the twins from Ruth's cousin's side and Josh's college roommate who had nowhere else to go. The conversation bounced politely from holiday plans to Charlotte's honeymoon ideas to the latest episode of some cooking competition show. My name came up once when Walter asked if I was still working in California. I reminded him again that I lived in Seattle. Then the bourbon started working. Uncle Mitch wasn't loud at first. He just leaned back in his chair, one hand loosely around his glass, and asked across the table if anyone remembered when Charlotte had dyed her hair pink in high school and got sent home for a week. Everyone laughed. Then he looked at me. His eyes were glassy but sharp in that way people's eyes get when they've been holding in too much truth. You know Hannah turned out all right too, didn't she? The table quieted. Ruth smiled politely and said, "Of course she did, we're proud of both our girls." Mitch kept going. "Funny though. Growing up you'd think Charlotte was the only one. Always the center. Always the picture on the Christmas card. What did you used to call her, Ruth?" "Your miracle." The word miracle made my mother flinch. Or maybe it was just the way Mitch said it, like it left a sour taste. He didn't stop. "Come on. We all knew it. Charlotte was the baby Ruth wanted. Hannah was just the gift with purchase." Silence. The kind that hits like a dropped glass. I saw Walter's hand tighten around his fork. Ruth looked away. Charlotte stared down at her plate like it was suddenly too fascinating to look up from. I didn't say a word. I placed my napkin gently on the table and walked out. The wind outside was biting. I wrapped my coat tighter around me and kept walking past the porch down the block, my boots crunching leaves that had gathered at the edges of the sidewalk. My heart wasn't racing. It was calm. Frozen. They all just sat there. No one corrected him. No one said no. Back in my childhood bedroom, I sat on the bed without turning on the light. The posters were gone, the desk empty, the shelves lined with boxes Ruth had labeled winter clothes and donate later. It didn't feel like my room anymore. Maybe it never really had. I opened my laptop. I hadn't checked the trust account in over a month. I hadn't wanted to know what else they might have taken. But I needed to know now. I logged in. Balance 0. For a second I thought it was a glitch. I refreshed the page. Still 0. The last transaction was 2 weeks earlier. A full withdrawal. Signed electronically. I stared at the name next to the digital signature. My name. I sat there, breath stuck in my throat. I clicked the signature icon. It pulled up a scanned image. It was neat, clean, my full name in cursive. But it wasn't mine. My hand shook as I called Monica. It was late, but she picked up. "Hannah, I didn't say hello. I just asked if she could check something for me." The trust. A transaction on the 16th. There was a pause while she typed. Then her voice changed. "The funds were released," she said. "Looks like the document was e-signed using the same authentication as before. It's all valid on our end. Can you send me the signed document?" She did. It arrived a minute later in my inbox. A PDF. Everything looked official. My name, my old email, even the IP address was traced to Hartford. It wasn't mine. I stared at the screen, then whispered more to myself than her. "That's not my signature." There was a long pause. I heard her inhale slowly. "Hannah, do you want me to open a formal inquiry?" "No," I said. "Not yet." "You sure? This is serious." "I'll let you know." I ended the call, sat back, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. They didn't just take the money, they forged me. They pretended I had chosen to give it up. That I had signed it away. Like I had been complicit in my own erasure. I opened a blank note on my laptop. Typed out the date. The transaction ID. The file name. I copied the PDF to a secure folder. Printed out 2 hard copies. One for Monica, one for me. I opened an old notebook from college and began writing everything I remembered. Every conversation. Every missed email. Every message from my mother that hinted at coordination. They had made it look clean, polished, but they forgot one thing. I write code for a living. I don't forget patterns. And I never ignore a breach. They say karma takes its time, not in our case. Exactly 7 days after Charlotte's glittering pre-wedding celebration, she was gone. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Gone. She vanished overnight like a celebrity avoiding paparazzi, leaving behind a groom, a florist demanding final payments, and a warehouse full of monogrammed champagne flutes. It was Aunt Susan who called first. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not even Charlotte. Susan, panicked and breathless, said Charlotte hadn't returned any calls and Josh's family had just announced the wedding was off. The reason Charlotte had eloped. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Eloped Charlotte. After spending 6 figures on a wedding where she didn't even invite her own twin sister, I didn't respond to Susan right away. I called Monica. She answered on the first ring. I told her what I'd heard. She paused. Then she said 4 words that made my stomach drop. It's Dylan, isn't it? It was. Dylan Frost. Former college athlete turned personal trainer turned. What exactly? He had bounced between gyms, fitness brands, and social media flirtations, but years ago he'd been something else entirely. He had been my college friend. Not close, but enough for game nights and group chats. Until one night I learned he'd sent a highly inappropriate photo to another friend of mine without consent. The girl reported him. He was expelled from school. I never heard from him again. Apparently Charlotte had. Within hours it was all over the Ridgefield Register. Headline from $1 million vows to midnight vanishing, the Green family wedding implosion. The article wasn't kind. It outlined the failed engagement, the lavish expenses, and the sudden elopement with Dylan Frost, a man the article kindly described as fitness entrepreneur with a complicated past. I knew what that meant. And so would anyone else who Googled his name. Josh's family, furious and humiliated, released a statement through their legal team demanding compensation for reputational damage, non-refundable bookings, and emotional distress. The number floated around was over $200,000. I read every line with a strange cold clarity. This wasn't mine to fix. I had not been invited. I had not been consulted. I had not signed any fraudulent documents. And then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up. Hannah, it was Mom. I didn't speak. It's your mother, honey. Listen, I know things have been tense, but Charlotte is going through a lot right now. She's overwhelmed. And we're dealing with a media nightmare. Still, I didn't say anything. I was wondering, Mom continued, if you could help us manage the fallout. Maybe talk to Monica, just see what our legal options are. My voice was calm, calculated. You forged my signature and stole my inheritance. That wasn't Charlotte, she rushed. That was a misunderstanding. Your father thought. No, I said. I have the document. I've seen the audit trail. I know what you did. And now you're calling me not to apologize, but to clean up your mess. Silence. Then the soft, familiar weapon she always used. You're her sister, Hannah. You always said family comes first. That was before you made sure I came last. I ended the call. I sat there for a while in the quiet of my apartment, the only sound coming from the dishwasher humming in the background. I wasn't angry. Not the kind that makes you slam doors or cry into wine glasses. I felt something sharper. Like the click of a puzzle piece falling into place. They never loved me for who I was. Only for what I could do for the ones they did. I opened my laptop and drafted a letter to Monica officially requesting an internal investigation into the misappropriation of Elaine Green's estate, citing violation of the specific clause that protects equal distribution. I attached the forged signature, the transaction history, and the clause from Grandma's will. I closed the file and sent it. The next morning, Monica called me back. She had already contacted the estate administrator and legal action was in motion. She sounded impressed and worried. They won't see this coming, she said. Good. And Hannah, she added, I found something else. There's another letter. Not just the one your grandma wrote to you. This one. It's a full codicil to the will. A legal amendment. She hadn't mentioned it before because it had been sealed, intended to be read only in case of breach. I asked what it said. She paused. Let me just say, if they wanted Charlotte to have the spotlight, they may end up with something else entirely. I hung up the call with a strange calm settling over me. I wasn't sure what was in that codicil, but I knew one thing. Whatever storm was coming, I wasn't running from it this time. Not anymore. Not ever again. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. Me and Grandma Elaine at my college graduation. Her handwriting on the back still legible after all these years. If they don't choose you, you choose yourself. I finally understood what she meant. And I was about to choose very, very carefully. The next morning, I parked in front of the house I grew up in, the same colonial on Maple Ridge Lane that once smelled like lemon pledge and oatmeal cookies. Today, it smelled like wet leaves and bad history. No one greeted me at the door. I let myself in. My father was in the den pretending to read a newspaper, though I could see his eyes hadn't moved from the same spot in 10 minutes. My mother hovered in the kitchen wiping an already clean counter. Neither of them looked up when I walked in, but the air shifted. Heavier. Denser. I placed the folder Monica had assembled on the coffee table. Cream cardstock. No labels. Just wait. Walter cleared his throat. Ruth glanced over, then quickly away. I sat down across from them, spine straight, palms folded in my lap. I think you should read this, I said calmly. All of it. Ruth's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the folder. She flipped it open and froze at the first page, the joint account statement from the trust. Charlotte's name highlighted. A wire transfer dated the week before the celebration. 6 digits. Walter leaned over to look, but didn't speak. Keep going, I said. My voice sounded detached, as if I were watching this from somewhere else. The next few pages were printouts from Echo Layer's cybersecurity logs tracing the IP address that accessed the account under my name. Monica had pulled favors for that. Then came the forged authorization letter with a signature that resembled mine the way a Halloween mask resembles a face. Ruth's lip quivered. We thought you wouldn't use it. He tilted my head. So that made it okay to take it, Walter finally spoke. We didn't mean for it to get that far. I laughed once. A single dry breath. Did Charlotte know it wasn't hers? They didn't answer. Of course she knew, I said. She just assumed I wouldn't do anything about it. Ruth dropped the folder onto the coffee table like it had burned her hands. She was falling apart, Hannah, she said, voice cracking. We were trying to hold her together. She couldn't take one more blow. And I could silence. Ruth wrung her hands. You're strong. You always have been. I thought you could handle it. I looked directly at her. You thought I could handle being stolen from. Lied to. Erased. Walter shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't about hurting you. No, I said quietly. But you were willing to hurt me to protect her. That's the same thing. Ruth's tears finally came. Slow and unflattering. She's always been so fragile, she whispered. Ever since she was little. You were independent. You never needed us. I stood. I needed fairness, I said. Not favoritism. I needed to be seen. I gathered the folder and placed it back in my bag. Walter stood too. What are you going to do? I met his eyes. I'm not sure yet, but I have every right to act on this, and you both know it. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Ruth covered her face with her hands. I stepped toward the door. I didn't want to fight, I said. I wanted a family. But you made me choose. No one followed me out. The wind rustled the dead leaves along the driveway. I walked back to my car, not rushing, not looking back. In the rearview mirror, the house looked the same as it always had. But something inside it had finally cracked. Back in Seattle, I let the silence of my apartment hold me for a while. No calls, no Charlotte. No Ruth. Not even Walter. Monica came over that evening, bottle of wine in hand. You good? She asked, kicking off her boots. I nodded. Better than I expected. She sat beside me on the couch watching me closely. They won't contest anything, she said. The evidence is solid, and given the clause in Elaine's will. I know, I said. I could freeze the remainder. File a claim. Maybe even criminal charges. Monica tilted her head. Do you want to? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into the side pocket of my bag and pulled out the letter. The one Elaine had left just for me. I had folded it so many times it felt like part of my skin now. Monica read it over my shoulder. If your family won't choose you, you may choose yourself. I whispered it aloud. I choose me. Monica placed her hand over mine. Then whatever comes next, she said, make it yours. Outside, Seattle rain tapped at the window like it knew something. Like it was waiting. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of what they'd say. Not of what they'd do. I had facts. I had proof. And for once in my life, I had a plan that didn't include asking anyone for permission. That night, I opened my laptop and began sorting files. Charlotte's transfer logs. The wedding vendors who never got paid. The canceled catering order from the rehearsal dinner. A thread was forming. Something that might just unravel the whole thing. I wasn't sure where it would end, but I knew exactly where to start. I walked into my office that Monday morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I had a full day ahead, back-to-back meetings and 2 investor calls before lunch. My assistant Raina met me at the door with a look that wasn't part of our normal routine. You have a visitor. She doesn't have an appointment. Said it's family. I didn't need her to say more. I nodded and handed her my bag. Send her in. 10 minutes. Raina hesitated, then stepped aside. And there she was. Charlotte. Wearing faded jeans, a plain blue hoodie, and sneakers that looked worn thin. No jewelry. No makeup. Her hair, once professionally styled, was pulled into a limp ponytail. She looked smaller somehow, like someone had wrung the light out of her. She stepped in quietly and stood there, not moving toward the seat across from my desk. Hi, she said. Her voice was rough, like she'd been crying for hours or hadn't slept in days. I didn't respond right away. I motioned to the chair. Sit. She sat down, hugging her arms around her like a child. I'm sorry, she said. I was awful to you. I know that. I stayed silent. She looked at me, eyes red. I messed up. Bad. Dylan. He wasn't who I thought. He took everything I had left. My savings, my photos, my passwords, then he shared a private video. I got evicted. My socials got flagged. I can't even get into my email. I let the words settle, studying her face. The panic, the shame, the desperation. But what struck me more than anything was the absence of something I had once envied in her. Entitlement. I folded my hands. What do you need, Charlotte? She hesitated. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I need help. I don't have anywhere else to go. I'm not asking to move in or anything, just anything. A place to sleep, maybe some work. I know you're powerful now. Do you need me or do you need money? Her eyes fell to the floor. Both. I leaned back, the ache behind my ribs pressing up. I remembered sitting across from her when we were younger in the backseat of Dad's old Ford on the way to Grandma's house. She had leaned her head on my shoulder and asked if we could share a room forever. We were 7. But that was before she learned how easy it was to get things by being the delicate one. Why now, I asked. Why not Ruth or Walter? She flinched. They said it's too messy. Said I should lay low, maybe go stay with Aunt Sherry, but I can't. I can't be in Georgia. I need to start over here. You're the only person who ever believed I could do better. That landed heavier than I expected. Because, once upon a time, it was true. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. Raina looked up from her desk. Next time she comes, let me know in advance. Raina gave me a slow, cautious nod. Charlotte was still sitting in the chair, frozen. That's it, she asked softly. That's it, I said. I'm not your safety net, Charlotte. Not anymore. She stood slowly, her hands shaking as she clutched the strap of her bag. I thought you'd understand. You of all people. I do, I replied. That's why I'm not rescuing you. She stepped out into the hallway. I didn't follow. The door clicked shut behind her. For a moment, I just stood there. Then I walked back to my desk, sat down, and opened my laptop. I had 15 minutes until my next meeting. Enough time to review the final document Monica had sent me. It wasn't a restraining order, not yet. It was a notice of breach. A formal step in the process of reclaiming what had been misused. What had been mine. It was precise, cold, and clear. And if Charlotte thought tears would make me tear it up, she hadn't been paying attention these past few years. She thought I'd be the same sister who cleaned up her messes, who canceled dates to drive her to auditions, who covered her credit card bill because she forgot her limit. That version of me had been retired. The one sitting in this office now wore tailored slacks, not hand-me-downs. She negotiated acquisition deals, not family dinners. She made sure people signed in blood before they entered her circle. And she never offered second chances unless they came with receipts. Charlotte's tears might be real. Her shame might be earned. But so was my peace. And for once I was choosing to keep it. The bright studio lights made everything shimmer a little too much, like the world was trying too hard to look perfect. My name had just been announced, and I stepped onto the stage of the afternoon talk show with a calm smile that didn't quite reach my stomach. I could feel the nerves vibrating under my skin, but I held my shoulders steady, my heels silent against the polished floor. The host greeted me warmly, and we exchanged a few pleasantries. Then she leaned forward, clasping her hands together like we were two girlfriends catching up after years apart. Echolayer's IPO was a huge success. How does it feel to have built something from scratch and see it reach this milestone? I let out a breath and smiled for real this time. It feels like I stopped running. Like for the first time in my life, I stood still and everything kept moving around me. In the right direction. The audience gave a gentle round of applause, the kind that felt more like recognition than noise. Then came the question I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. Has anyone in your family reached out to congratulate you? A silence wrapped the studio. Not the kind that demands a dramatic story, but the kind that allows truth to land without resistance. I kept my voice steady. Family isn't always where you come from. Sometimes it's where you build yourself a home, and I've built one. From the ground up. The host nodded, a flicker of something like understanding in her eyes. The interview moved onto lighter topics like women in tech and mentorship and the future of AI integration. I played my part, answered with poise, but underneath it all, I felt something shift. Something old, letting go. Backstage, I peeled off the microphone and exhaled. The hallway was quiet, lined with posters of past guests and faded flowers sent by networks and fans. Angela was already waiting near the green room, arms crossed, her smile dry as usual. "You didn't hold back," she said as she handed me a bottle of water. "Didn't feel like there was anything left to hold back," I replied. I took a sip and leaned against the wall. "I meant what I said." "I know. And you looked great saying it. Proud of you, Hannah." I gave her a look. "That the professional kind of proud or the friend kind?" She smirked. "Both. And I've got news." I raised an eyebrow. "The board wants to formally offer you the director position at the new Austin branch. They're expanding fast, and they think you're the right face to lead it." I paused, letting the words settle. I hadn't thought that far ahead. For the past year, my energy had been anchored in exposure, in getting Echolayer off the ground and surviving. But Austin would mean space. It would mean distance. It would mean maybe a new beginning. Angela studied me, then added softly, "You don't have to say yes right now. But I think you've already made your decision." I didn't answer. Not yet. That evening I walked home instead of taking a car. The fall air was crisp in Seattle, leaves crisp underfoot, and the sky bruised with lavender and gold. I passed by a bookstore I used to go to in college, one that had barely changed. Through the window, a young woman was reading a paperback on the floor, oblivious to everything around her. I almost stopped to say something, but instead I just smiled and kept walking. My phone buzzed once in my coat pocket. I didn't check it. Not yet. The moment was too quiet, too whole. When I reached my apartment, the lights from the street reflected across my window, casting gold onto the hardwood floors. I stood in the doorway for a long time, looking around at the space that used to feel like a stopgap but now felt like mine. On the coffee table sat a worn manila folder, Monica's last update, untouched since the day she'd given it to me. It held the finalized legal documents, Charlotte's forged signature report, the bank statements, and the irrevocable trust I'd had drawn up after the breach. A part of me had wanted to keep it nearby like a shield. Now I felt ready to put it away. I slid the folder into a drawer and closed it with a soft click. The next morning, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee. Angela called before 9. So I stared out at the skyline sun rising behind the cranes and rooftops. "Tell the board I'm ready," I said. "Austin, it is." There was a beat of silence, then Angela laughed. "You sure I'm not sure about anything? But I'm not afraid of starting over anymore. That's enough. I'll let them know." When I ended the call, I didn't feel a surge of triumph or even relief. What I felt was something quieter. Like I had let go of something I had been carrying for far too long. The hurt was still there. The memory of my parents' betrayal, of Charlotte's recklessness, of everything I had once begged to be seen for. But it didn't define me anymore. I got up, went inside, and started packing. Only the essentials, the rest could wait. By noon, the movers were scheduled, the paperwork in motion, the lease signed on a townhouse near Lady Bird Lake. It would be a different kind of chapter. Not one built from proving myself, but from choosing myself. And for the first time in years, the light coming through the window felt like it belonged to me. The email hit my inbox at 6:42 a.m. I was sipping coffee in my new place in Austin, the sky still bruised with early light, when Monica's name popped up. Subject line: Media Alert. Lawsuit filed. I clicked. A PDF was attached and below it a one-line message. "You're going to want to see this." The file opened to a local news headline from Connecticut. Whitmore family sued for defamation and damages in failed wedding scandal. My heart didn't race. It didn't even twitch. Instead, I leaned back and read every word with a stillness I didn't recognize in myself. According to the filing, Jordan Caldwell's family, the groom Charlotte had paraded in front of 300 guests just weeks before, was suing Ruth and Walter Whitmore for reputational damage, emotional distress, and recovery of the venue. Deposit citing fraud and public humiliation. The lawsuit cited gross misrepresentation of financial circumstances, alleging the bride's family knowingly withheld information that led to significant losses. They were using words my parents never thought they'd hear in connection to their social life: restitution, libel, misconduct, and they were about to learn what it meant to face consequences without me shielding them. I scrolled further. Embedded in the article was a video, one I hadn't seen before. It was shaky footage from the wedding itself, taken from the back of the reception hall. Charlotte stood in a sequined gown near the dance floor, screaming into her phone. Ruth tried to wrest it from her. A vase shattered. Walter yelled something incoherent in the background. Guests looked away, embarrassed. A few phones filmed anyway. The caption read, "This is what happens when you build everything on lies." I closed the laptop. Not from discomfort, I just didn't need to see it again. The damage was done, and it wasn't mine. Later that morning, I called Monica. "How bad is it?" I asked. She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Bad for them. Good for your peace of mind. The Caldwells are pursuing it hard. They've got statements from vendors, even some of the guests. There's talk of subpoenas if it escalates." "Will it?" "If your parents don't settle quickly, yes. It's already in the press cycle." The venue coordinator gave a quote to the Hartford Ledger about how disrespectfully they were treated. And Charlotte's public meltdown is in every clip. The internet's not being kind. I felt a twinge of something, not pity exactly. Just the ghost of a memory of what it used to feel like to be her sister. "And there's more," Monica added. "Of course there is. Social media's dug up the engagement campaign, the luxury branding, the PR photos. That whole extravagant setup. It's now trending on TikTok as the most pretentious wedding that never was. People are using it to talk about privilege and fake wealth. It's being memed to death." I laughed once dry and low. They wanted a spectacle, they got one. The afternoon brought another email. This time from Monica's office, not just her. The subject line was cold and final. Official demand for restitution. Funds diverted from Hannah Green's trust. I opened the letter and read every word slowly. Monica had followed through on what she promised me months ago. It was a formal legal demand sent to Ruth and Walter, itemizing the exact dollar amount taken from the trust account set aside for my wedding and future. With interest calculated and a line that hit harder than anything else, failure to respond within 10 business days will result in the initiation of civil proceedings. I signed the confirmation and sent it back. I didn't hesitate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor by my bed, knees pulled up the room, quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioning. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even satisfied. What I felt was heavier than either. Like a door had shut, not with a slam, but with a quiet click that told me I'd never be going back. The next day, it was all over the internet. A Buzzline article went viral. The headline screamed in bold they chose the wrong daughter, and paid for it in public. The piece was sharp. Brutal even. It traced the entire descent of my family's standing in Ridgefield from society darlings to local scandal. It named names. It showed side-by-side images of Charlotte on stage at her engagement party, and then Charlotte in blurry footage outside a budget motel arguing with someone over a phone. And in the middle of it all, they quoted me. From the interview I had done just days earlier. Family isn't always where you come from. Sometimes it's where you build yourself a home. The words had taken on a life of their own. They were being reposted on Twitter, paired with the article quoted in captions turned into Pinterest graphics. I didn't respond to any of it. Monica called again that evening. They haven't replied. Not even a receipt acknowledgement. We'll file on Monday. Good. Let it go public. You sure? Yes. Let it be known exactly what they did. No more shadows, no more secrecy. She was quiet for a moment. You're not the same woman I met last year. I know. And thank God for that, she said, then hung up. I turned off the lamp and stared at the dark ceiling. In the silence, the weight of everything settled, not as a burden but as something earned. A scar maybe, but one I could live with. Outside, the city pulsed faintly, unaware of the quiet justice taking shape in my life. And that was enough for now. The sun was starting to dip behind the skyline when I set the last glass on the counter. The living room buzzed with quiet laughter and music playing low in the background, a mellow playlist Angela had made just for this night. It wasn't a huge gathering, just a few people who had stayed close through all of it. Angela, Monica, her wife Celia, and my friend Rachel from undergrad. I wasn't used to hosting. Not like this. Not with intention. Not with peace. But something about this night felt like a send-off, and I needed it more than I realized. Angela handed me a mocktail and plopped down on the couch beside me. You know, for someone moving to Texas, you sure didn't pack enough shoes. I grinned. I figure Austin's more of a boots and sneakers kind of place. I'll adapt. She leaned her head on my shoulder just for a moment. You will. And you're going to shine there. I swallowed a lump in my throat before it could rise. These were the kinds of friendships I never had when I was trying to prove myself to people who would never see me. This was what staying felt like. The doorbell rang just as I was clearing the dessert plates. I wasn't expecting anyone else, and everyone I invited was already here. I opened the door to find Uncle Mitch standing there holding a wooden box with both hands. Hey, kiddo. My stomach fluttered. I hadn't seen him since the fallout. He looked smaller, somehow, like the last few months had worn him down in places he used to carry strength. Hi. Come in. I didn't know you were in town. Just flew in. I figured I owed you a proper goodbye. He stepped inside and set the box on the coffee table, nodding politely at the others. Angela stood and made an excuse to grab more ice. The room slowly cleared, leaving just the two of us. What's in the box? I asked. It's from your grandmother. My breath caught. She left it with me years ago with specific instructions. I wasn't supposed to give it to anyone unless certain things happened. He looked down at his hands. Things she feared might come true. He opened the lid and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, the edges yellowed with time. My name was written in her distinct looping script. I took the letter with both hands, sat down, and unfolded it. The scent of lavender and old cedar rose faintly from the paper. My dearest Hannah, if you're reading this, then life has taken a turn that no one ever wants to prepare for. I don't know what they did, but I have my guesses, and if you're hurting, I am so sorry. I wish I could protect you from it all. But I know your strength. I saw it in you even as a little girl when you insisted on planting daffodils in the frozen ground and they still bloomed somehow. If there comes a day when you think about going back to what broke you, I beg you not to. Don't return to the place that made you small. Don't hand your heart to people who mistook it for a burden. Build your own place, Hannah. Make it beautiful. Fill it with people who see you. I'm so proud of you. Love always, Grandma Elaine. By the time I finished, the words were smudged with my tears. I didn't cry loud, I didn't need to. It was the kind of quiet grief that came with being seen after too long in the dark. Uncle Mitch sat beside me, his hands folded in his lap. She believed in you, he said softly. Always did. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater. I know. That's what kept me going sometimes. He looked toward the window where the last light of evening cast long shadows across the floor. You've become someone she would have admired deeply. I turned to him, my voice steady but thick. I forgive them. But I won't forget. He nodded slowly. That's fair. He stood to leave but paused by the door. You ever need anything, even just someone to talk to you, call me. Doesn't matter where you are. Thank you, I said. I meant it. After he left, I packed the letter carefully back into the box and set it on my dresser. Then I poured myself a glass of water, turned off the music, and sat on the balcony. Below me the city shimmered. It wasn't mine yet, but it would be. I picked up my phone, opened the airline app, and typed in my destination. Austin one way. The flight left in 2 days. I didn't hesitate. I hit confirm. There was no fanfare, no dramatic music or flash of clarity. Just a deep, resonant certainty that the next chapter would be mine to write. I watched the confirmation email arrive. Then I looked up at the night sky, still and endless. Alone, yes. But for the first time, not lonely. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen casting a quiet blue across the apartment walls. The night outside was still. I could hear a faint hum of traffic from the distance, but it felt far removed from me now, like everything that had once tied me down. I pulled up a blank email. No draft, no outline, just my own words this time. To Ruth Green, Walter Green, Charlotte Green, subject. Closure. I took a breath and let my fingers start moving. I wasn't sure how it would all come out, but I knew I needed to write it, not for them, but for myself. I'm not writing this with anger. I'm not writing this with bitterness or to wound you. I'm writing this because I owe myself a conclusion. You see, for a long time I believed that if I just worked harder, loved more quietly, forgave more easily, then one day you'd see me as enough. As family. As someone worth choosing. But I've come to understand that love, when conditional, is simply a transaction, and I've stopped offering myself as currency. My life is no longer yours to access at will. My success is not a shared resource. My peace is not something you can borrow when yours runs dry. I'm not here to retaliate. I'm simply letting go. Attached are the documents you likely hoped would never surface. There's the copy of Grandma Elaine's will, notarized and filed 6 months before she passed. Her signature was real. The one you tried to replace it with wasn't. Monica had it examined by a forensic document expert. The results were clear. There are also the bank statements. The transfer of funds from the trust account to the wedding planner Charlotte chose. Over $200,000 of misappropriated inheritance spent without my knowledge or consent. I've included the photos from that wedding. The gowns, the imported orchids, the $1,000 wine glasses that shattered by the end of the night. There's a screenshot of the video that went viral. Charlotte standing under the floral arch, confused as half the guests whispered and slipped out. You remember that moment, don't you? The day she became a meme. There's the headline that followed, Bride of the Year, or just another family cover-up. And lastly, there's the article from the legal column. The one titled, When Estate Fraud Collides with Social Vanity. You won't find my name in any of it, but I was in all of it quietly in the margins. And now finally, I'm stepping out of them. I paused, sipping the lukewarm coffee I had made earlier and forgotten. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My chest didn't feel tight the way it used to when I thought about them. I felt calm. Detached maybe, but not numb. I returned to the message. I'm not sending this to demand apologies. I stopped waiting for those years ago. I'm sending this because I want no confusion. No future calls claiming you didn't know. No more attempts to use silence as shelter. If you ever thought of me as a backup plan, I regret to inform you there is no backup anymore. I am not available to be the safety net beneath Charlotte's next fall. I am not here to patch the legacy you allowed to rot. I'm somewhere else now. Somewhere I built myself. With people who stayed. With friends who chose me. With work that doesn't require my soul as collateral. I will not contact you again. Any further communication can go through Monica. You can keep the memories you revised. I'll keep the truth. I signed the email simply Hannah. Then I sat back rereading every line. Not for edits, for finality. It wasn't about making sure the tone was perfect. It was about making sure I meant every word. I did. Before I hit send, I clicked through the attachments one more time. The real will. The expert report. The financial records, the screenshots, the headlines. Every piece of the life they tried to erase now staring them in the face with no room left to spin the story. I pressed send. The quiet after was strange. Not heavy. Not dramatic. Just quiet. I closed the laptop, stood, and walked over to the large window facing out toward the skyline. The lights of the city blinked back at me like stars. Somewhere out there, Monica was probably reviewing tomorrow's filings. Angela might be packing up her office in prep for her move to Boston. My Uncle Mitch was likely asleep, unaware he'd soon get a thank you card I'd been meaning to write. And them. They were probably sitting in the same living room where they used to skip over my science fair ribbons. Maybe they'd just gotten the email. Maybe they'd deleted it. Maybe they were reading it word for word in stunned silence. Did it matter? I didn't care. Not anymore. I poured the last of the coffee down the sink and rinsed the mug clean. Then I pulled my suitcase from the closet and placed it open on the bed. Folded the blouse I wore on the day of Echo Layer's IPO. Laid it flat across the suitcase lining. Next went my favorite jeans. Then the book Grandma Elaine gave me with a note scribbled in the margin that said, "You'll need this when you build something new." I added the letter she had left inside the wooden box. I hadn't told Monica about it. Or Angela. Or anyone. Some things didn't need witnesses to be true. I looked around the apartment. The soft rug I'd chosen on a whim. The mug with a chip I refused to throw out. The framed photo with Angela, Monica, and me at our first product launch. None of it fancy. All of it mine. My phone buzzed. A notification, no name, just a number. 3 messages. First, I hope you're happy. Second, we never meant for it to go this far. Third, you were always dramatic. I deleted them without reading further. And then I took a deep breath, clicked the airline app on my phone, and booked a one-way flight to Austin. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I zipped up the suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed, letting the silence stretch. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. And I was done holding back. I opened the window wide. The Austin air rolled in warm and full of unfamiliar scents. Outside, the skyline blinked with promise. I stood in the middle of my new apartment barefoot on the cool hardwood floors, holding a mug of coffee I hadn't reheated yet. Boxes were still unopened, labels written in my own handwriting that said things like books or office or keep. But nothing said past. The sunlight caught the frame on my new desk. It was a photo of Grandma Elaine, the one where she's sitting on her porch swing with a glass of lemonade in hand, looking like she's seconds away from saying something wise and slightly inappropriate. Underneath the glass frame, in bold handwriting I copied from one of her old recipe cards, were the words she told me once when I was a teenager. Be your own legacy. I ran my finger along the edge of the frame and smiled. That morning I had received a letter from Ruth. A physical letter. I had held it for a long time before deciding not to open it. It still sat on the kitchen counter beside a half-burnt candle. The envelope had my name in her handwriting, which looked surprisingly shaky. But there was no return address, just a faint imprint of our old family crest on the back flap. I had thought maybe I'd read it eventually. Maybe. Charlotte never reached out. Not a message, not a call. I wasn't surprised. Some apologies never come, especially from people who can't face the mirror. And maybe that silence was her apology. Or maybe it was pride. I didn't need to know. Later that afternoon, I met Angela and Monica at the small bakery 3 blocks from my apartment. We sat outside under a red umbrella, drinking iced tea and splitting a slice of lemon cake. Angela asked how the new team at the Austin office was treating me, and I told her the truth. It was fresh. It was hard. It was mine. Monica raised her glass to toast. To second chapters, and I said to writing them ourselves. That night, I walked home slowly. The sun had dipped low, spilling gold across the sidewalks and turning the glass buildings into fire. A dog barked from a rooftop patio. Somewhere someone played jazz through an open window. I passed a bookstore that was still open and made a mental note to go back on Saturday. No one here knew me. No one here knew my family. No one here cared about my wedding fund or what Charlotte had done or how Ruth used to cut my birthday cakes unevenly. It was liberating. Near the end of the block, I stopped at a little cafe tucked between a plant shop and a tailor. The bell above the door jingled when I entered. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and espresso. A quiet hum of conversation and clinking cups filled the space. I ordered a cappuccino and took a seat by the window. Across from me sat an older couple sharing a blueberry muffin. They weren't saying much, but their hands were touching. I watched them and felt something warm move through me. Not envy, not longing. Just recognition. I pulled my phone from my bag and opened my notes app. I wrote one line. I didn't send it to anyone. I just needed to see it typed in my own words. I made it. I looked outside. The world didn't pause. Cars kept driving. People kept walking. But inside me something had shifted. The ache I used to carry like a second skin had softened. There was no more waiting for someone to validate me, no more hoping someone would finally say they were proud. I had stopped needing it. I finished my coffee, slowly savoring it. When I stepped outside again, the breeze had picked up, carrying the scent of something floral from the nearby park. I walked without headphones and letting the sounds of the city guide me. A child laughed across the street. A cyclist rang their bell. A busker sang a cover of Fleetwood Mac. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I wasn't measuring myself against anyone. I wasn't rehearsing old conversations in my head or wondering what I could have done differently. I wasn't thinking about who should have loved me better. I was just here. Alive. Whole. Unburdened. Sometimes healing isn't fireworks. It's not a grand apology or a courtroom win or an inheritance reclaimed. Sometimes healing is ordering coffee and drinking it slowly. It's saying no without guilt. It's sleeping through the night without nightmares. It's looking at a photo of the woman who believed in you most and whispering, "Thank you." And sometimes healing is letting go without needing to watch what happens after. If you've ever chosen yourself, even when it felt like the hardest thing to do, even when it meant walking away from the people who are supposed to love you, I hope you know you're not alone. I hope you share that story. Because someone else out there is still holding on to a rope that's burning their hands. Letting go is not weakness. It's the beginning of your own legacy.